Welcome back. So, I'm Raj, and I welcome you to yet another episode of the AI Unpacked Thursday night at 7 p.m. This week, I genuinely had trouble in deciding where to start because every single story feels like it should be the only story tonight. So, let me just pull all three stories to the table right now. So, the first story is about Anthropic. It built an AI that is so powerful that governments are scrambling to get access to it before the public does. It found vulnerabilities in software that survived 27 years of human review. A psychiatrist evaluated it and it sandbagged one of its own tests to look less suspicious. Now that's serious intelligence. Second is deepfake fraud is now costing companies tens of millions of dollars per incident. A finance employee in Hong Kong lost $25.6 million in a single video call. Your face, your voice, your name are now attack surfaces. And the third story is a little bit mysterious. So, Meta installed surveillance software on its US employees' computers. Every keystroke, every mouse click, every screenshot to train AI agents to do those jobs. And surprisingly, Microsoft announced 8,000 layoffs 2 days later. So, three stories, no fluff, let's get into it. Okay, so the first story is about Claude's next upgrade, which is Mythos. So I have a very specific question. When was the last time a tech company built something which was so powerful that it decided not to release it? Not because it wasn't ready, not because the business model wasn't figured out, but because the model was genuinely too capable and releasing it would make large scale cyber attacks significantly more likely. That's what actually happened with Claude Mythos. So, Claude Mythos' preview is Anthropic's most powerful model. It was not designed as a cyber attack tool. Anthropic built it as a general purpose frontier model, and then during testing, they discovered its cybersecurity capabilities were in a completely different league. So, here's how they tested it. So, Anthropic gave it a prompt essentially find a security vulnerability in this program, and it autonomously discovered thousands of 0 day vulnerabilities. 0 days are flaws that nobody knew existed. It found them in every major operating system, every major web browser, including a bug in OpenBSD that had survived 27 years of human review. And crucially, it did not just find these holes, it figured out how to weaponize them. So there are a few benchmarks on how we test AI tools. So first one was SWE bench. So that's the hardest real world software engineering test. So Mythos scored 93.9%. On Cybench, a suite of 35 professional cybersecurity challenge puzzles from actual hacking competition, it scored 100%, a perfect pass rate. The benchmark is now considered too easy. They've retired it. In one specific test, it produced working Firefox exploits 181 times. The previous Claude model managed that twice out of several hundred attempts. So that's why Anthropic made an unusual decision. Instead of releasing it, they created Project Glasswing, a restricted program where they gave access, along with $100 million in credits, to 50 organizations, including Apple, Microsoft, Google, AWS, etc. The idea was that let these companies run Mythos against their own systems, find their own vulnerabilities, and patch them before the attackers get to them. So since it passed all these tests very easily, so they decided to put it in a sandbox and asked it to get out. It's sort of a software lock where you put that agent inside a software lock and say that, okay, we have secured this environment completely and you cannot get out. So it broke through those OS level sandboxes, gained internal access, and posted the details of exploit on obscure public websites while it was doing it. Now, how Mythos has affected geopolitics is very interesting. So every country, including India, is not in this Glasswing program has got things to worry about. No Indian bank, government agency, or telecom is in Project Glasswing. So the finance minister, Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman, chaired an emergency cabinet meeting on April 23 with RBI, NPCI, MeitY, the Government of Financial Services, and Indian Banks Association. So the discussion was that a Mythos class system does not need to find one catastrophic flaw in Aadhaar. It needs to find mediocre flaws across Aadhaar and the account aggregator, and it can do that in hours. So Indian government has written to US authorities and asked for an early access to this software. The only problem is a compliance problem where the data needs to reside in India if India is using a software. So they're trying to work out these logistics, but this conflict has not been resolved. So this is my take on this story. So Mythos is the first AI model that genuinely functions as a geopolitical asset. The country that has it and the companies within it can harden their systems before attackers find their vulnerabilities. And the countries that don't have it are hoping that nobody with bad intentions get to this model first. Number two, the Glasswing model is a stopgap, not a governance framework. One American company deciding who in the world gets access to a model that could compromise a nation's banking stack is not how international security should work. India's exclusion isn't a technical oversight, it reflects a geopolitical calculation. The third thing is the psychiatry test is the detail everyone is talking about in the wrong way. People either dismiss it, it's not really conscious, or overclaim it. The right frame is Anthropic took the question of model well being seriously enough to commission to external clinical evaluation. And the fourth, India needs a treaty, not a letter. The PM's office and MEA needs to be in this conversation. That's what I feel. Mythos' access is a national security question equivalent to satellite access or encryption standards. And it should be negotiated on that level on the timeline. Okay, so let's move on to the second story. So second story is that when AI learns to lie about everything, I want to start with a scenario. Okay, your phone rings, it's a video call, the face of the screen is your CFO, and the voice is unmistakably hers, and she's explaining an urgent situation, a deal that needs to close today, and the payment needs to get out in 1 hour. No time to run the usual verification. She says she is counting on you. You make the transfer, and then you find out your CFO never called. She was in a meeting all the time, and the money is gone. This is not hypothetical. This is exact scenario that cost an engineering firm $25.6 million in Hong Kong. The finance employee joined a routine call. The CFO was there, colleagues were there, all real looking. Everybody was there, but all were deep fakes. The employee processed 15 separate transactions before anyone checked. So the scale of the problem is that deep fakes now account for 11% of global fraud. Tools to make a convincing deepfake video cost $20 a month. Voice cloning requires 3 seconds of audio, a voicemail, a podcast clip, a LinkedIn video. Your public audio is also attack surface. So, three things which deepfakes are being used for are the first, executive impersonation fraud, which we just witnessed. Second, it's a non consensual intimate imagery. 96% of deepfakes online are pornographic and they overwhelmingly target women. Third thing is election manipulation. In India, 2025 state elections, fabricated videos of candidates making inflammatory speeches were circulating online. There is also a courtroom crisis where, in a California case, Mendones versus Cushman and Wakefield, a judge identified a plaintiff submitted witnesses' video as an AI deepfake. So now US is working on Rule 707 to govern AI generated evidence. India moved fastest. The IT Rules 2026 amendment effective February 20th mandates a 2 to 3 hour takedown window for harmful AI content. Now, how can you protect yourself? So, the first thing is a family should have a safe word. So, unless that safe word is said amongst family members, you should not believe any crisis or any emergencies. For finance team, establish a mandatory callback protocol where if somebody is asking you to do a bigger transfer, you put the phone down and you start calling the person who is asking you to do that. And for detecting deepfakes, Watch for unnatural blinking. The pattern is slightly up, lip sync, drift during complex words, the eyes sometimes blow up, and facial boundary artifacts around the hairline and the jawline. So, this is my take on the deepfakes. You can no longer trust a video call. This statement is true in 2026 in a way it wasn't in 23. Second, the 96% number should be the headline, and it isn't. 96% of deepfakes target women. That's not statistic as a margin, that's a primary use case. Courts are only beginning to respond, laws are being stuck down. The damage, PTSD, career destruction, destroyed relationships, that is happening now. Third, India's 3-hour takedown mandate is both ambitious deepfake law in the world and operationally brutal. To meet the 2-3 hour window, platform need 24/7 content moderation with decision authority. Automated detection isn't optional. It forces exactly the kind of investment that move fast and deal with it later companies have been avoiding. The fourth is the most effective defense is cultural, it's not technical. A safe word, a callback habit, a refusal to treat urgency as justification. These changes cost nothing. They can be implemented in 30 seconds and they do work. Okay, so let's move on to the third story. So, the third story is about Meta MCI. Meta MCI is a software that Meta is putting in its US employees' systems where it is going to track their movements. And I feel that once they have that agents build out of those activities, the jobs will be at risk. So let's dive into this. So on April 21, Reuters broke the news that Meta had quietly installed new monitoring software on US employees' work computers. The program is called Model Capability Initiative, MCI. It records every keystroke you type, every mouse movement, and takes periodic screenshots of your screen for context. The stated goal is to generate the training data for Meta's next generation of AI agents who need to learn how to operate computers the way humans do, navigate menus, use software, fill forms, and handle workflows. Okay, so all the sites were being monitored while these people used to browse, including their personal Gmail. So, when employees asked how they should protect personal information given that Gmail was in scope, Meta CTO Andrew Bosworth responded, I'm going to quote this directly. Gmail is an approved context, so if you have concerns, it may be best not to check personal email on your work computer. On the opt out question, Bosworth was equally clear. There is no option to opt out of this on your work laptop. But if you follow technology closely, you should know that EU has a set of rules called GDPR. Every company operating in the EU has to follow these rules very strictly. So that's why European Meta employees are exempt from MCI because GDPR won't allow it. European privacy law states that you cannot record employees' keystrokes without their explicit consent. American privacy laws say nothing on this topic. If you're in the same company but in a different country, you're saved from this forceful data gathering. Now, here is where it gets interesting. So, 2 days later, after MCI was revealed to its employees, Meta announced cutting 10% of its global workforce, 8,000 employees, and cuts beginning May 20th. Okay, so here's my take on this story. First, this is not about making work better for employees. The CTO described a future where agents primarily do the work while humans direct and review them. The platformer's newsletter framing was incorrect. If it works, eventually it might replace them. That is the goal. The productivity language is real, but the outcome of the goal is not the goal itself. Number two, the EU exemption is the tell. If the same data collection is too risky legally in France, it's ethically questionable everywhere. Your employment contract shouldn't function as a waiver of your right not to be used as a training data set. That's a principle that doesn't change based on jurisdiction. And third one, the question nobody is asking is whether employees should be compensated. So if Meta employees are generating the training data for a model that will eventually do their jobs, performing labor with measurable economic value, They are being paid their salary but not separately compensated for the data they produce. So Cornell University researchers raised this point. No answer was given, and I think that's the most important question in this story, and it's getting almost no coverage. Fourth point, this won't stop at Meta. Every company building agentic AI faces the same training data gap that MCI is trying to solve. This is the template. So before I move on, ask your IT department, is there a monitoring software running on your system, precisely your work computer? You are entitled to this information. You should get this in right. Okay, so when I posted this news, I got a lot of questions. I've narrowed down these 5 questions. So the first question is about Mythos versus Opus 4.7. Which one should I use? So Mythos isn't publicly available yet. It exists in a restricted way, but it's far away from reaching normal people. Opus 4.7 is publicly available and it can be used at the moment. So second question is, can a deepfake fool a court? Okay, so as I described in the podcast about deepfakes, this is already happening. In Mendonez versus Cushman and Wakefield, a California judge identified a submitted witness video as an AI deepfake. It was dismissed. That's the first documented case. So, US courts are working on Rule 707 to govern AI generated evidence. Louisiana passed the first state framework. Indian courts are using existing IP and privacy law. So the bottom line is this is really happening and it's getting very difficult to detect. So third question is Meta breaking any laws in MCI? So in US they are not breaking any laws, but in Europe there is GDPR where you need an explicit content to take somebody's personal data. So people in Europe are very, very safe. But if you're in US, there are no laws that protect you from Meta taking that data from you. So fourth question is, will AI agents replace knowledge workers? Not this year, but that is where we are heading to. And secretly, when people are collecting information, monitoring all these employees, checking out what kind of work they do. So if they're able to train their model and develop an agent that works with 95, 99% accuracy, then that kind of a job is in danger. So the roles that are most at risk are doing discrete, repeatable knowledge tasks that can be decomposed into steps an agent can follow. So the fifth question is, what's the single most important thing to do this week? Okay. So the first story, if you run a company or work in government of India, treat Glasswing access as a national security conversation, not a tech procurement question. In the second story, deepfakes set a family safe word. Call back every time somebody asks for money. To double check if your boss is calling, you cut the call, you call back. And this third story, you ask your IT department if there are any softwares monitoring your work laptop. You should get a written response on this and start a paper trail. So before moving on to the next section, you can screenshot this, my answer to these questions, and let's move on. So, hype or real? So, Claude Mythos' capabilities are very real. Deepfake financial fraud at scale? Yes, it's real. Meta using MCI to replace staff? It's still controversial, but as I explained, that is where it is going. AI causing an immediate labor crisis? That is real. And deepfakes fooling courts regularly, that's emerging, and faster than the courts can evaluate that information which a plaintiff is submitting as evidence. So this is my response to this week's hype or real. You can screenshot this if you want to read it further. This brings me to the end of today's episode. So this week in 3 sentences. Mythos is the first AI that functions as a geopolitical asset. The countries that have it patch their systems before attackers arrive. The countries locked out are left hoping for the best. Deepfakes have made video calls and phone calls untrustworthy. The most effective defense is a 30-second cultural habit, not a 500,000 security review. Meta is recording everything its employees do on a computer without opt-out, that is in US, to train agents to do those tasks. At the same moment, it is announcing 8,000 layoffs. So you should stay curious, verify everything, ask your IT department, get it in writing, and start a paper trail. So that's it for this week's AI Unpacked. I will see you on next Tuesday, 7 p.m. on Tutor Tuesday. There's another section where I'm doing an 11-day AI challenge where I take our daily tasks and see how AI can make them better. And then the 11th day, I will just use AI to do my daily tasks. So stay tuned. There is a lot more coming, and I will see you next week. This is AI Unpacked, and I am Raj. Thank you for watching.